Sorry about that. Um, so we have a very, very special presentation for you today. So to introduce myself, my name is Philip Jones. I am the founder and one half of the host of A Second Chance.
And I am Tafaro Cook, two-time kidney transplant recipient, survivor of dialysis for over a decade, and the founder of Kidney Care Coaches, where we coach stage 3 to stage 5 kidney disease patients.
Appreciate you being on, Mr. Cook. Well, she's back. She's back. It was just number three in like the past month, and we appreciate it because she always brings it. She gave an awesome presentation at our kitty conference, and we definitely appreciate that. Um, I know the first time we wanted to do kind of a simultaneous thing where we were on here and on Instagram, and that didn't work out. So we ended up going to Kelsey's Instagram and doing a show there, which still turned out great. So today, as you can see on the screen, Kelsey's going to give us a presentation on how to grocery shop with CKD. So before I let Kelsey go into her presentation, Kelsey, go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to everyone about grocery shopping with CKD because it's such an important topic. Everyone needs to know how to do it, and it makes it so much less stressful when you have these tips and tricks in your back pocket. I'm a kidney dietitian. I live in the Philadelphia area, but I work with people from all over. I work with people all the way from stage 5 to stage 1 CKD, and I started my career in dialysis. So I have a really wide range of people that I work with kidney disease, and I just love sharing so many tips and tricks with everyone.
Thank you, Kelsey. The floor is yours. You can go ahead and go into your presentation.
Awesome. All right. So, like I said, I'm from the Philadelphia area. I live right outside Philly, but I actually work with people from all over the country, which is super cool. I get to meet tons of awesome people with kidney disease. I love The Office. So sometimes you'll see pictures or memes or Michael Scott everywhere. That's one of my all-time favorite shows. So I always put him somewhere in my presentations. And as always, I'm a registered dietitian. I could not give medical advice. I can also not give you guys individualized, customized support or nutrient needs. You would need to work with me one-on-one for this, or also work with another dietitian or your doctor to know this information. So please consult your medical doctor for specific medical advice. So when it comes to grocery shopping with kidney disease, where do you even start, right? You walk into the grocery store and you just see everything and you're like, I mean, it's so overwhelming. You have no clue what to do. So really, the first thing that I recommend doing so that it takes some stress away from you is making a list. And I mean, I'm a culprit of not always making a list myself. And I walk in, I get totally freaked out, and I'm like, I just want to leave. But making a list helps so much. Even if it's just a couple things, it can really help to give you a plan before you head in there. So always start by making a list. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on a notepad, whatever's easiest for you. Sometimes I find that the easiest way to make a list is just by looking in your fridge and your pantry and seeing the things that you normally eat and saying, okay, I'm running low on this. Let me write it down. And that really helps you to have a plan when you get in there so that you don't just start grabbing things, and that's when the chaos can start and you can get a little bit overwhelmed. Sometimes it's also helpful to organize your list by section of the grocery store. So maybe you start with produce. What fruits and veggies do you need? And then you go to like meats or the deli or seafood or dairy and eggs. Sometimes you want to make it a little more organized so that you feel more prepared when you're going into the grocery store. So here we have some common things that you might put on your list, right? Fruits and veggies, grains, dairy and eggs, because they're usually near each other, meat and seafood, frozen items, canned goods, spices or condiments, oils, vinegars, drinks, and then I always put snacks separate because it's kind of fun. I always leave it for last too, right before I check out. I make it its own little category, but number one is definitely going to be fruits and veggies, because usually the entrances to the grocery stores are going to be in the produce section, which is a really nice starting point. And that leads me into my next slide. Shop the perimeter first. I'm sure you guys have probably heard this before, even you two, hosting the show.
Yes.
It's usually like the biggest piece of advice, but that's because around the perimeter are usually the freshest items. So those are the ones that you want to go for first. Fruits, veggies, fresh meat, seafood, dairy, eggs, right? Those are the things that we want to grab first, because in the center of the grocery store is usually more of those processed foods. So always go first around the perimeter, and then when you're done, kind of work your way in the middle if you need to. Because sometimes in the middle, there's the canned goods, the grains, cereals, breads, things like that we still need. Step 3 is going to be reading the label. And this is really important. And so I'm going to go through a couple steps on how to read the nutrition label to make it really easy for you, so that you can just pick up an item, read the label, and say, okay, I know I can get this, or I don't think I want to get this today. So here's a little diagram about reading the label. And I know there's a lot on here, so we're going to go through it together. So first things first, let's start up at the top. So up here, you're going to see the percent daily value. This is something that's a little confusing on the label. So here is where it is, right in this right-hand column here. And the reason this is important is because the percent daily value is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So this label is basically telling you the nutrition information if you were to eat 2,000 calories a day, which is pretty standard for a lot of people. However, that doesn't mean that that's what everyone needs. So again, always working with a dietitian is going to be helpful, so you know what you need in a day. But so for example, this percent daily value right here for total fat says 15%. So what that means is that this amount of fat right here is actually 15% of what you need in a day. So if something says 95%, then that might be a little high for you, unless that's your only meal of the day. Although I've never seen anything say that. So I think we're safe. The next thing you want to look at is serving size, right? Because you can pick up a box of food and eat the whole thing, but how many servings really was in that food? Because this nutrition label tells us what the nutrition is per serving. You can see it here. Serving size is 1 cup. So this nutrition underneath is for 1 cup. And this is an apple pie mixture that I made. So that's what this, like a canned apple pie mixture. So that's what this is. And so for 1 cup of that mixture, you are getting this much nutrition. Okay. And then we also want to look at the servings per container, because like I said, you could eat a half of this, but how many servings was in that half portion that you ate of the whole box? So there's actually 4 servings in the container. So if you ate the whole container, you would get 4 times this nutrition. So it would actually be 800 calories and 40 grams of fat. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you said that, because now people have a regulator where they understand. And I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people get confused with that.
Yeah. Okay, good. I just want to make sure that's perfect.
Yeah.
And then really the next thing you want to look at is calories. So we're kind of going this way. Calories can be important. However, they're not usually the most important thing when it comes to kidney health. And I'm going to be honest about that. I don't focus on calories a lot with my clients. I focus on other things because yes, managing your weight is really important when it comes to CKD or ESRD when you're on dialysis, but there are other things that are a little bit more important, and we'll go into those too. So the next thing we have is fiber. This is something that's super important for everyone, not just when you have CKD, but it's especially important when you have kidney disease because the more fiber, the better for your heart, for your bowels, for your kidneys. So the more fiber, the better. So we can see in this particular serving size, 1 cup of this food, we are getting 4 grams of fiber. The goal is usually 25 grams a day. So that is something to kind of aim for. And that's a pretty standard recommendation. Men usually need a little bit more, but again, you want to work with a dietitian to know that. Okay. And then we're going to go to protein. So this information is for someone with CKD, so someone not on dialysis. Usually, most of the time, you want to follow a low protein diet. So that's why it says here, go low on the protein. But just remember that to get that individualized help and individualized nutrient needs, you need a dietitian or a doctor. So when you're on dialysis, you probably need more protein. So for this specific serving size, 1 cup, we get 13 grams of protein. The next thing we want to look at is fat. Now, fat can be really helpful because these two fats here, saturated fat and trans fat, are the ones that we want to be as low as possible. Those are the not so healthy fats. The ones that we want to look for more often to see a higher rate of those is unsaturated fats, not saturated fats. So these are important to look at. You want to limit the saturated fat and the trans fat in your foods as much as possible. And then here, sodium, that is a really big one. Sodium is so important when it comes to managing CKD or your kidney health, right? Most people with CKD are on a sodium restriction. So looking at this sodium is going to be so important because if you eat 1 cup of this food, you're getting 250 milligrams of sodium, right? But if you eat 3 cups, you're timesing that by 3, right? So that's why it's important to look at that serving size too. And we're going to go into sodium in detail in a couple slides too. And then next we have potassium and phosphorus. So phosphorus isn't on the label. So if you have a high phosphorus level, you're going to want to know some high phosphorus foods. And so the next one, potassium, actually now in the US, they have to include that on the nutrition label, which is really nice because that wasn't always the case. So you're going to see potassium on there more often now, which is great because a lot of times you need to limit potassium when you have CKD. And then lastly, ingredients. This is really important when it comes to phosphorus. You can find the phosphorus level, not the exact level, but you can find if there's phosphorus in your food by looking at the ingredient list. Anything with PHOS in it is going to have phosphorus in it. But you can also see what the most abundant ingredient is. So usually the first ingredient is going to be the ingredient that's in there the most. So in this food, it's actually flour because of the crust for the apple pie. The next ingredient would be water, and then butter, and then salt, and so forth. Okay, so the next step after you look at the label is going to be to watch the sodium. And this is really important, like I said, because most people with kidney disease are on a sodium restriction. So always reading the label for sodium, especially when you're buying packaged foods at the store, is going to be really helpful. And these are my favorite spices and seasonings, so that's why I always recommend Mrs. Dash, but now it's called Dash. These are salt-free seasonings, and I always get the question from people that They heard that these weren't good for them, that they had extra potassium in them. But actually, Mrs. Dash doesn't have extra potassium in them. So you are totally fine with that. That's totally safe. And usually I say the more the better because it makes food so flavorful. So we were looking at that percent daily value before, right here. So now I'm going to tell you how to spot a high and low sodium food so that it can make it a little less stressful for you when you're at the store and trying to buy those packaged foods. So let's say we're looking at a box of rice. Maybe it's seasoned rice, okay? And you heat it up on the stove. So it's in one of those boxes where you just add water. And so a low sodium rice would be under 5% daily value, whereas a high sodium rice is going to be over 20%. So if it's in between, you know that it's generally pretty okay for you. If it's over 20, you know that it's going to be a high sodium food for you. So that might be something that you want to limit or maybe find an alternative. So that's how you can spot it really easily. Look on this right-hand corner here. We can see for this one, it says 10%. So it's right in between that 5 and 20. So that should be totally fine. This one, whoever's watching, you might want to take a screenshot because this is really helpful to carry with you on your phone or tablet or whatever you might have. So when you see things on the label, you've probably seen it, guys. Very low sodium, reduced sodium, sodium free. What do those things mean? It's just a lot of jumbled words that kind of make you very confused and overwhelmed, even more so. So here's a little breakdown of them. And this is from the FDA website. So less than 5 milligrams, that's like nothing. That means that it's sodium free or salt free. Okay, very low sodium is going to be 35 milligrams of sodium or less. Low sodium is 140 milligrams of sodium or less. Reduced sodium is a little bit tricky. That can be confusing. It really means that they took the product that they originally had and reduced the sodium 25% than that original product. And then this one, the lightly salted or light in sodium, is going to be similar to this, but instead of 25% reduction, they did a 50% reduction. And then this one is my favorite. I always make sure I look for this and tell my clients to look for this too. No salt added or unsalted. It means that there was no salt added to that product. So what's really nice to look for is canned goods. So beans, canned veggies that say no salt added or unsalted. That means that they didn't add any salt to that product. So let's look here. This one says 250 milligrams and it's 10%. So it's not considered a low sodium food because it's over 140, but it's still, I would consider it a medium sodium food. Okay, step 5, limiting the processed foods. That's going to be really helpful when you're grocery shopping. You can see here I picked a chip aisle. Now, when I talk about processed foods, nowadays, most foods are processed in some way. Even your fruits and vegetables, right? The act of spraying water or washing fruits and veggies or produce is in a way processing them. But what I'm talking about is really highly processed foods, like packaged, baked goods, like Little Debbie or Tasty Cakes. Those types of things are going to be considered highly processed. And those are some things that are going to include nutrients in them that aren't as beneficial for kidney disease. So if you can limit the amount of processed foods that you're buying and stick to that perimeter when you're in the grocery store, you're going to be really successful. And here, these are just some products that I really like, and these are some really good brands. So I want to go through them. And if you guys follow me on social media, you see I post about these brands a lot because they're really kidney friendly. Victoria has a low sodium marinara sauce that you'll find at the grocery store. Sweet Earth is a really good frozen fruit food brand. So yes, it's going to be processed, but it's going to be more kidney friendly because they use tons of veggies. They have low sodium options, and they're usually a little lower in potassium if you need that restriction. Forager is a brand of yogurt that I really like to recommend for people that can't have a lot of protein, because it's a very low protein yogurt. So this is one that goes great in like a smoothie or a yogurt parfait. Annie's, I'm sure you guys have seen that. They have boxed mac and cheeses. They have dressings, salsa, frozen foods, I think like little bunny snacks. Their logo is a bunny. So those products are usually a little bit more kidney friendly. I love their salad dressings. Same with Bragg. That's a really nice brand at the grocery store. These are some more kidney friendly options for salad dressings and sauces because they don't add a lot of salt to them. So they're low sodium. And then this one, all my clients and Instagram followers know that Dave's Killer Bread is my favorite. It's so kidney friendly, whether you're on dialysis or not. It is packed with fiber. It's relatively low sodium. It also tastes delicious because bread is one of those things that's really hard to find that when it tastes good, but it's also healthy. So this one is a great option. Food for Life is another one. Now, Food for Life is a little pricey. So if you have a pretty high grocery budget, I'll recommend this one, but this is a little more affordable. The Food for Life has tortillas, breads, wraps, English muffins. They're usually in the frozen section, so that's why it's a little bit more expensive, but still a good option. And then for soups and canned goods, Health Valley is a really good brand because they have no salt added soup. So there's no sodium in here. It's very, very minimal. And that's just crazy when it comes to soup. Usually a lot of soups like Campbell's soup is going to have like 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So that's sometimes half of what you need in a day. So finding a brand like this is really helpful. And so those are my tips for grocery shopping with CKD. And I would love to, answer any questions that you guys have. And here is how to reach me. I have a free Facebook group. You can follow me on Facebook too, Instagram or TikTok.
That was great, man. That was great information. And I just want to, one question I want you to answer is, and this is where a lot of clients of mine get confused. Let's talk about the different types of phosphorus. Because there's some, there's some natural phosphorus. Can you explain to us about that, please?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So this is one of those topics that confuses everyone. Even when I was in school and learned about it, I was confused too, because it's so different than anything we've heard of. So when it comes to phosphorus, there's two types of phosphorus. There's phosphorus that's naturally found in food, right? When it grows, when it's made from an animal or from a plant source, grown in the ground, like let's say potatoes or carrots or something like that, or a chicken or a turkey that we might eat. That's considered natural phosphorus. So that phosphorus is just naturally in those foods. But there's also another type of phosphorus that is added to foods to help preserve it and stabilize it. And that's what we call added phosphorus or phosphate additives. And when you think about these foods, it's really hard to know what to do because it's not on the label, right? There's no phosphorus on that label. I hope one day there is, but how do you know if you're eating phosphorus or not? So you're going to know because, like I said, a lot of those foods just naturally have phosphorus in them. That's like your meats, animal products like dairy, cheese, milk, yogurt, as well as whole grains, bread, pasta, rice, things like that. That's the natural phosphorus. And then there's the phosphorus that's added to things like dark colored sodas like Pepsi, Coke, Dr. Pepper, as well as A lot of times phosphorus is added to bread or tortillas in the form of phosphate additives, as well as a lot of bottled drinks like bottled iced tea or lemonade or things like that. And that's the one we want to look out for. So if you can, and you can spot it right here in the ingredient list, if you see that on any items that you're buying, it's probably a good idea to just put it back and find something else, because that's where you're going to get all that phosphorus from. So if you see it on that ingredient list, my recommendation is always to try and avoid it if you can.
Right. Let me ask you this though: does the different types of phosphorus affect your body in a different way?
Yep. So when it comes to that natural phosphorus, right, that's naturally in those foods, animal products, plant-based sources, there's different absorption rates of phosphorus. So what that means is when you eat, let's say, a turkey sandwich, that turkey has phosphorus in it. But the compounds that are in that turkey, the different nutrients that are in that turkey, only make it so that a little bit of phosphorus from that turkey is actually absorbed in our bodies, which is really cool. So yes, those foods have phosphorus in them, but it's not fully absorbed. So the way that it goes is those phosphate additives are the highest absorbed in the body. They are absorbed 100%. The next thing that's absorbed is the animal products. So dairy, milk, cheese, yogurt, ice cream, turkey, chicken, fish, beef, lamb, pork. That's going to be absorbed a little bit less than those phosphate additives. So it's kind of in the middle. And then the least absorbed foods are going to be those plant-based foods. So whole grains, breads, pastas, rice, and same with beans too. That's a big one. Nuts, seeds. So that's like the least absorbed. So if you can, opting for those more plant-based sources or plant-based foods is going to give you less phosphorus, the least out of all of those options.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up, because, I tell my clients, oatmeal is a good source of, fiber, a good carbohydrate that can sustain your blood sugar, especially if you have diabetes and anything like that. And one of my clients is like, it has phosphorus. And I told him, but I explained to him the different types of phosphorus that these things have, opposed to potato chips. And I'm glad you explained it well. I'm gonna take your explanation and use it, because it was so good. I like that a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. That's one of the most confusing things, I think, when it comes to a kidney-friendly diet. Phosphorus is just tricky. So I hope one day they add it to the food label like potassium or sodium.
Right, because like you said, at first they wasn't even doing potassium, but if they can get phosphorus, that will clear up a lot, especially for people who have CKD. But,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Right. Another question I wanted to talk to you about was, let me ask you this. Sometimes when I work with people on dialysis, what happens is they don't have an appetite, and we see that quite a bit. Like they just don't have an appetite, and I usually tell them, well, if you start, if you're able to do a little exercise, we can stimulate your metabolism, and hopefully you'll get an appetite. But I see it mostly with people doing the cycle or peritoneal dialysis. Is it because of the dextrose, or what do you think it is why they don't have an appetite?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it can be from a couple things. So when you're on dialysis, your body is not doing its normal body processes, right? Like your body's kind of flipped upside down, and your body's trying to make sense of it, right? It's the dialysis machine is helping your body, but it's not fully functioning where it should be.
Right.
And that's just normal for when your kidneys aren't working the way they should be. So sometimes that can throw your appetite off. Sometimes, especially when it's hemodialysis, the act of the blood kind of getting cleaned and getting put back in your body can make your appetite go down. I saw it with a lot of my dialysis patients, but when it comes to peritoneal, yes, you are getting extra nutrients, extra calories from that dextrose. So sometimes that can fill you up. It's also that feeling of fullness when you have that fluid in your body. You're kind of like, ugh, I don't feel like eating. That's the last thing I want to do. So sometimes my recommendation is to start out by eating the things you actually like. So for a couple of days, put that diet mindset in the back of your head and say, okay, what do I feel like eating? All I want is a sandwich. So I'm going to eat a sandwich. If that's the one thing that you want and you're going to actually eat it, because you still need nutrition, right? If you're like, the only thing I want is mac and cheese, okay, have some mac and cheese. And then the next thing you can do is have very small but frequent meals. So maybe when you wake up, you really have no appetite, having some crackers with peanut butter on it might be a good idea, just something little. And then maybe 2 hours later, you have, let's say, an apple. Okay, just something little to keep you going. And then 2 hours later, maybe you have, a yogurt or something like that. So just little things throughout the day can help stimulate your appetite, give you the nutrients you need so that you're not losing out on those nutrients.
Right. And thank you for that. I'm glad you also talked about the difference between somebody who has CKD and then end stage. Because when I work with people, I'm telling the end stage people that they have to get their albumin up, and they have a challenge with that. And that, I'm telling them to eat more protein, while the person on CDK stage 3 to 5 where I work, stage 3 or 4, I'm telling them, okay, we have to cut some of this back. And let's explain this. Can you explain why this works like this?
Yeah, that's a great point. So when you are on dialysis, what happens is your body kind of goes into overdrive. Like, it is working so much harder than it used to work. So you're naturally burning more calories. Your body's getting rid of more protein because the dialysis machine is filtering out that protein. So what you need to do most times is replace that protein by eating more protein in your diet. So instead of having one piece of turkey on your sandwich, having maybe 3 to 4 might be a good idea. So you're getting more protein. But when you have CKD, it's kind of the opposite. That extra protein can really put a lot of stress on the kidneys. So it's usually a good idea to get rid of some protein.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for clearing these things up, because that's where we see the people getting, kind of mixed information, where they're like, I thought you said eat more. Where if you're in this situation, don't eat more. But if you're in this situation, we want you to add a little bit more protein and things like that. Phil, go ahead. You know me, I ask questions all day. You're muted, Phil.
Ah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Sorry about that. So we'll take a quick break real quick, and then we'll come right back.
Okay.
Hey, what is going on, world? Edward, Mr. Why Not Drake is here. Hope you all are having a fabulous day. I just got on here real quick just to ask you all to please consider supporting the Why Not Foundation. Hey, what is going on, world? Edward, Mr. Why Not Drake is here. Hope you all are having a fabulous day. I just got on here real quick just to ask you all to please consider supporting the Why Not Foundation annual Why Not Impact Lives holiday drive, where we go across the country delivering gift bags to pediatric transplant patients and families at various treatment facilities and hospitals. And this year, we'll be adding a little extra seasoning by treating families to dinner. We'll be giving them gift cards so they can go out and buy turkey, some ham, chicken, whatever they're into, and just bring their families together. Because, we're all about connecting and bringing families together and brightening the lives of people. So I ask you all to please consider supporting us by visiting www.whynot.org, spelled YNOTT.org, to make a donation to our holiday drive session. And also, I ask you all to follow us on all social media platforms at Why Not Connect, spelled YNOTTCONNECT. And just like my hat say, just believe. Now trust and believing that you all will support our efforts this year and help us impact and brighten the lives of many people. Why not have a great day, and God bless. Take care.
All right. That was a word from Mr. Drake, CEO of the Why Not Foundation. So one thing that I know that it was like the first thing he said, which was making a list, checking your labels, things like that, right? And so when you said that, I immediately thought about my aunt because she was cautious like that. She was that type of person that very, very rarely ate out, and she didn't even have any type of illnesses or anything like that. And she cooked, soups and chilies and things like that all the time. And, so when we're in the grocery store to get those things, that was like one of the first lessons that she taught me was, how to read the labels, because she understood how vital that was going to be in my life. And so she wanted to instill that into me to make sure that I knew, how to do that to be able to take care of myself. So, also the list is important because a lot of us, especially men, we think we can remember everything off the top of our heads just because. And so make a list, put it on your cell phone, write it down, or whatever the case may be, because it's important. Because 9 times out of 10 you might be thinking about it throughout the day, like, oh, I need this, I need this, I need this. And then you don't have a list, and then you actually get to the store and you get back home and then you realize you left 4 things off that you should have gotten that you didn't remember to get. So the list part of that is very important. I think can this is what I do want to ask you. Can you explain, and maybe you did not, just I was maybe zoned out a little bit. Explain why they, I won't necessarily say separate, but the way they list ingredient, like the percentage of stuff that's in things on the labels, like why they go, why the list goes the way it does from top to bottom.
So for are you talking about more for sodium or for like making a list in general and what to include on there?
Yeah, so like the ingredients, that the label that you had in your presentation, right? So is there a reasoning why the order that they have it in goes the way it does?
Yes, I believe that the reason for that is because that's usually the things closer to the top, which people's eyes are going to go to first, I would think, are sometimes the more important things to look at, whereas like the vitamins and minerals at the bottom are going to be the last thing people look at, and sometimes that's not as important for people. Now, when you have a chronic illness like kidney disease, then I think the label should be totally different. I would love to create a label made for people with kidney disease so that it could be so much easier for them to look at. But unfortunately, that's not what our country does. But it would be really nice to have that.
Right. Another question I had for you was like, okay, I'm 15 years out with my transplant, and I'm doing great, and I still eat a pretty clean diet. Even right after I got out of my transplant, I still watch my sodium. I eat mostly plant-based. I do eat some meat when I lift weights and things like that. But how would you tell people to eat that after they had their transplant? Because a lot of people just go hog wild. Yeah, you don't have any restrictions, but you still want to keep yourself in that good health. So how would you say that?
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's really tricky. I know Jonathan Trailer and I were just talking about post-transplant and how to eat the other day when I chatted with him. It's so tricky because you think that you can just go back to doing whatever you want,
Right.
but the best thing for you after a transplant is going to be to still, one, watch your sodium, because no matter if you've had a transplant or not, you're still going to be susceptible to the issues that can come from a high sodium diet.
Right.
So whether that's with your heart or your kidneys, whatever it might be, blood pressure. So always still watch your sodium. The second thing is going to be that usually after a transplant, you might need a little bit more protein to help you heal and recover. But again, that's going to be individualized too, based on the person. And then number 3 would be that sometimes after you've had a transplant, you want to make sure that you are limiting foods or types of foods that are going to cause you to maybe have a bad reaction to the transplant. Is because you're immunocompromised, then you're on drugs you're on medications that are putting your body at risk for diseases and illnesses. So avoiding things like buffets is a good idea, because you don't want to have a chance of getting a foodborne illness, because it could really harm the transplant, the kidney. Another thing is like fresh cut fruit or veggies from like a store. You want to try to avoid those because there's more risk of bacteria when they cut them and put them in the plastic containers versus just buying a whole fruit or a whole veggie.
Right.
So those are probably my top 3 things for after a transplant.
Now, if somebody's on dialysis and they're taking binders, and some of the challenges we see with people taking binders are, having hard bowel movements, especially because, they're on water restriction, you're on fluid restriction, then you're taking binders. And so we know what binders do. Binders take the phosphorus and bag it up, and soak it up. What would you say when people are taking these binders and they're having challenges with bowel movements and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I saw that all the time when I worked in dialysis. I mean, it can be painful too when you are not able to go to the bathroom, but you have to take these pills because you have to control your phosphorus. So one of my great recommendations would be to try and talk with your doctor about maybe a fiber supplement. And now you're going to need to drink water with that. So it's going to be a balance of how much water you're drinking, because you still need to follow a fluid restriction when you're on dialysis. But something like Metamucil sometimes can be helpful, or like the Metamucil cookies or crackers, that can be helpful. Or eating like 1 to 2 prunes a day can sometimes stimulate, bowel movements. And sometimes I recommend the prunes over the prune juice, because the prune juice is going to be really concentrated in potassium, whereas a couple prunes is going to be less potassium.
That's a good one right there. I forgot all about prunes. So I would definitely put that in my repertoire to help people, because I remember even when I was little, my mom would make me have some every now and then, and I'd be like, I don't want them. But that's a really
yeah, they definitely help, even though some people find them very gross. They help.
And what you said was, not just drinking the prune juice, because the food itself is going to help you, excrete more, and that's a really, really good one too. Oh man, these like I said, these are some wonderful ones. And let's talk about sodium, because even with transplant people, at post transplant, we still can retain fluid. We still can make the heart and the kidneys work harder when we're taking that extra sodium in. And I'm not against sodium, because we all need sodium for the body, but we do have to limit it. And that's why I'm glad you put that sign up of Mrs. Dash, because Miss Dash is my friend. That's what I used all the time, because I was like anti-salt. But again, I worked out quite a bit, and I still needed some sodium also. So the challenges we see in the sodium, and you also talked about, walking the perimeter when we grocery shop. And that's big, because I feel there are less sodium foods around the perimeter opposed to inside.
Definitely.
So, yes. Can we talk a little bit about the sodium challenges we see all the time?
Yeah, exactly. So really you got it totally right. So the highest sodium foods are going to be in the middle of the store. That's why I always recommend doing that last, or sometimes avoiding it in general can be helpful, because that's where the majority of your sodium intake is going to come from. If you're eating fresh meats, seafood, dairy, fruits and veggies, and whole grains, you're not really going to get a lot of sodium. You're going to get a good amount that you need for your body to live properly, but you're not going to get a lot of extra sodium. The extra sodium that's going to put you over the edge with your sodium restriction is going to be from those packaged foods in the middle of the store, and from the salt that you add to your food. So that's why Mrs. Dash is great. That's why avoiding that section of the store can be helpful. If you see the snack aisle, the packaged food, processed, highly processed foods, you see it and you just say, okay, maybe I'm going to keep walking today, so I'm not going to get that extra sodium in.
Right. And another thing we haven't talked about, and I still see this challenge with people, is the alcohol. A lot of times when you're on dialysis, people still drink alcohol, and I tell them, if you're doing hemo, the alcohol is still staying in your body until you do that next treatment. So if you was to, drink some alcohol on Friday, and your next treatment is on Sunday, that toxicity in your body for that period of time can be a real challenge. I was on a hemo for a while, and I would come in on Monday and people would smell like they were drunk, and they still would, I didn't drink, and they still would be like, oh, man, I still feel like I'm still drunk. Well, you are, because that body, So can we talk about what the effects of alcohol can do when you're on, CKD?
Yeah, exactly. So you're exactly right. When it comes to kidney disease and alcohol, one of the things when you're on dialysis is that your kidneys can't filter out that alcohol the same. So limiting it is pretty important. I always say moderation with that is going to be key. If you one day are like, I really want to go out to dinner and have a glass of wine, okay, totally fine. But if you're doing that every single day or multiple times a day, that's when it's going to cause a lot of issues. So every once in a while, okay, but I would recommend doing it when you're going to have dialysis the next day. So if you're on a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday shift, then going out to dinner on Friday, having that glass of wine, you go in the morning for dialysis, that's going to be a better scenario for you. It's not going to put as much stress on the kidneys. And then, like you said, if you're drinking on a Friday and you're not going to treatment until Monday, that can be bad news for you. So not only is it extra fluid on you, so you might be going over your fluid restriction, it's going to put strain on your heart, on your lungs. It's also technically, making the kidneys work harder, and they're not able to process that. So it's a little bit of added toxins in the body.
And I feel it can also mess up the liver, because the liver has to work to cleanse that out as well. Go ahead, Phil. You know me, I'll ask all questions. Phil, you're muted.
I want to go backwards a little bit, back to dialysis. So, what? I gotta put this. What is the difference for somebody that's dealing with, let's say, let's just go with our three: in-home dialysis, peritoneal dialysis, and hemo, as well as in-center. When it comes to certain levels that they need to pay attention to, right? So we all know that fluid is like basically number one if you're in-center patients, because they only go 3 times a week. But when it comes to like, phosphorus and potassium and calcium and, those things like that, what are each of these three? What do they need to be focused on? I mean, all of it's important, but there's some things that doctors just get spooked off of sometimes when it's not in the range that they needed to be in. Certain other ones, can fluctuate and be, a point or two over or a point or two under, and they're like, that's all right. But then you have those ones that they're like, hey man, this don't look right. So what exactly are those that these patients need to pay attention to and make sure that they are following what these doctors are telling them to do, or dietitians or whatever, to make sure that these levels come back the way they need to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when it comes to the different levels and the different lab results that you want to pay attention to, across the board, I would say potassium going to be probably number one. Second one is going to be phosphorus, and the third one is going to be calcium, I would say. And those are really important because the body regulates those three values really tightly. So if you start to go up or down, like that's when your doctor is going to be like, uh-oh, we got to do something. What's wrong with this? Because it can throw you out of whack. It can really cause some damage. When you have a high potassium level, you've seen nurses, techs, doctors, dietitians get crazy about potassium, because if it's so high, it can really hurt your heart. It can make you have a heart attack, put you in the hospital. So that's why it's probably number one. Number two, like I said, phosphorus, because over time that can cause a lot of heart issues too, organ issues. It's just not good. Sometimes you might have seen people with high phosphorus for years and years. They have all these spots on their body that are really painful and itchy. That's from high phosphorus. So we want to try to avoid those things, because that's what can happen. Same thing with calcium. If your calcium goes way up, your doctor is going to get right on you and try to do something to make it a little bit better, because if your calcium's really high or really low, you're probably going to go to the hospital too, because that's when you can see some harmful effects.
Right. The challenges that I've seen with those phosphorus with the bone problems, I never forget when I did peritoneal first, then I started hemo. And when I first started hemo, a girl had broke her kneecap walking down the steps because of prolonged phosphorus, years and years of this phosphorus being over a 7. And that's quite high. And that's what happened. And I was right then, and it was when I first started, and I was quite shocked. And that's when it shocked me into always paying attention to my phosphorus. Like, oh, does it have phosphorus? Because I'm not doing that, because I didn't want anything like that happening. And so that was more of a scared straight situation for me, where the phosphorus, and I learned at firsthand that it can affect the bones and the joints. And it can even affect them to the point where after you get a transplant, it can cause some challenges after your transplant, a disformity or anything like that. So that's why it's so important to take care of these minerals, because after transplant, these things can cause challenges as well.
Oh, definitely. I'm glad you brought that up. That is one of the things that I saw the most too. And I even saw people sometimes having to get surgery to go deep under the skin to get rid of some of those issues, or sometimes amputations too, because the bones and the joints are just so far gone from that high phosphorus. So that's why it's just so important to control it. And unfortunately, you got scared into doing that, but that's like the worst case scenario, to see that on your first day. Oh my goodness. But
it was kind of a good thing though. When I first walked in there, I seen that, I was like, okay. And that's when I was like really, and because I didn't have any challenges with that with PD, I was fine with that. But once I seen it right there, and I knew what it was, but I really took concern with that once you seen things like that. So there's always a reason for those things. But I'm done with questions. Go ahead, Phil.
No, I'm not gonna. I know it's late on both ends. So, Kellsey, we greatly appreciate that presentation. Is definitely something that people need to see.
Yes, thank you.
And not just holiday times, just in general, to know how to shop for themselves with this illness that we have. So, And some of those things can be applied to just life in general. It doesn't
I
matter
believe so.
about
I believe
having
all of
illness.
them can. I believe all of those things right there apply to everybody. You know,
Yes.
especially the shopping list applies to everybody. I don't care if you have the best health in the world. You will continue having the best health if you the perimeter first. You know, make a list. Perimeter. All these things are great information for
Right.
across the board.
Especially checking labels.
Yes.
You know, instead of just picking up like, oh, that's what I need. All right, click.
One of my pet peeves is I don't go grocery shopping hungry because
Yes.
I will go crazy. So that's we forgot about that. We're like, I'm telling you, because those colors they can pull you to those inner aisles because you're hungry and you be like, ooh, that looks good, you know, as you start eating with your eyes. And so that's one of my pet peeves. I do not go to the grocery store hungry.
That's a good one, definitely, for sure. Oh my goodness.
So to end, Kellsey, because I want to try to keep this under an hour so we can re-air it again later. What would you want everybody that's watching now or in the future to take from your presentation today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that the number one thing that I want you to take with you is to be on the lookout for different things in the grocery store, right? Don't just go in willy-nilly without a plan. Go in with a plan, be looking at labels, be mindful of the things you're buying. Don't just throw stuff in your car and hope for the best. So really be intentional with your choices.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Cook, you got any words?
Thank you, Kellsey. It was wonderful. This information is so great, and I will be applying it with my clients. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. It was so fun. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Definitely be bringing you back again for sure.
Yeah.
So this Thanksgiving week, real quick, run this in the next 2.5 minutes. This Sunday, Lily and Bob Schultz. Lily wanted to donate her liver to her father, but unfortunately wasn't able to, and was denied that from the hospital. But she still wants to donate anyways and save a life. So she donated to a young lady in her town. She donated 60% of her liver. So her dad is still looking for a liver, and so they will both be on Sunday to tell their story together as a family. And then Monday the 22nd, Mr. Cook here will be telling his transplant story here on the Second Chance. The 23rd, I will be doing the same and telling my story with transplant. And the 24th, we will be having a donor tribute panel on the Second Chance to have a conversation with donors and get more awareness for donors and tribute to these people, because without them, you know, me and Mr. Cook had this conversation before. Without them, we're not here. You know, there is no recipient without a donor at the end of the day, regardless of how you put it, deceased, living, whatever. If there is no donor, we do not get to live, period. So we need to start showing love and support to these donors as much as possible. And then you know, so I'm there for now. We do have some other things coming up, but I'm not gonna throw everything at you all at once. So thank you all for being here again, Kellsey, thank you, and we will see you all Sunday.